who will kind of help shepherd this morning's program, Derek Blount.
Morning. I started my adventure in genealogy about 31 years ago. Took over from my grandfather who had 25 years of genealogy that he started back in the 1940s. And he left me an interesting batch of material to work with. His charts look like this. Okay? He would take a sheet of paper and type on it, and then he would take strips of other paper with other people's names on them, staple them on, or tape them together, and those were his charts. That's how he started. For the balance of the day, be sure to turn off your cell phones or silence them, please, and any other electronic devices that you might have. I'd appreciate that. We're going to talk a little bit about Scottish genealogy, and we're going to talk a little bit about how I got into it and about some of the things that you're going to see today. I grew up in a period of time when, we had a centennial for the Civil War, so there was a lot of interest in history. So my grandfather fed me history until it was coming out of my ears. And during that period of time, he was doing all of his genealogy work from the 1940s all the way through the 70s until he passed away. And then he passed it on to me. Well, he passed on a lot of material to me. And so the first thing I thought, well, I'm going to have to get birth certificates, I'm going to have to get death and marriage certificates, I'm going to have to get the census records, church records, baptism, all of that. I'm going to go out and dig up some ancestors and some cemeteries. Not literally, of course, but I got my grandfather's records. I got a 4-drawer file cabinet filled with paper. Everything you could think of. My grandfather was a pack rat. He saved Christmas cards, postcards from people's vacations, all their letters, their notes, scraps of paper like this, and that was all in that 4-drawer file cabinet. He also left me a book of about 200 or 300 pages of pedigree charts. My beginnings began like this, stacks and stacks of paper. The pedigree charts look like this, hundreds of pages, and none of it sourced. So I began 31 years of sourcing and citation everything that I could possibly do and putting it into a computer. Oops, sorry. Back that up. So the first thing we had to go through were records and records and records. What were we going to have to collect? What, where, and why? Because he didn't collect a lot of the records. He collected words from people about what they did or what they knew. But where do the records come from? They come from treaties, they come from laws, rules, regulations. Those are the things that create the records. So we need to know something about history. History matters, because everything that happens in history, from politics, to conflicts, immigration, all the other things that go on, all of that matters because that's what's driving your records for you, to find those things. The culture, the religion, and the traditions also are a piece of it. A lot of genealogists forget about that until sometime later after they got the whole thing put together and they said, wow, this is really dry. And nobody in the family wants to listen to this. But you need the stories to go along with it. So the culture, the religion, and the traditions matter a great deal. We'll talk about a lot of that today. The people in their communities matter. Everything that's going on locally is just as important as it was nationally. So when you look at the history, you've got to look at the local history as well. What's going on? Why are people doing things that they're doing? Why are collecting the records that they're collecting? Without history, there's no treaties, there's no laws, rules, and regulations, and we have no records. So the history drives the creation of these. The culture, religion, and traditions color our history and our genealogy and add richness. It adds contrast to our basic facts of birth, marriage, and death. It allows us to paint a picture of our ancestors against the backdrop of their circumstances. And all of this assists the imagination and promotes understanding. Our ancestors come alive in our minds and begin to understand who we are and where we come from. DNA adds a new dimension to genealogy, and you'll hear about that today as well. That full file cabinet, full of content, that's the meat that goes on the bones of genealogy. We don't trash that. We keep it and cherish it. We are the chosen. Each family, there's one who is called to find the ancestors, to put flesh in the bones and make them live again, to tell the family story and to feel that somehow they know and approve. Doing genealogy is not a cold gathering of facts anymore, as it was at one time, but instead breathing life into all who have gone before. We are the storytellers of our tribe. Celebrate your Scottish family. Every family has a history, so what's yours? Today, you're going to hear about a lot of the history. You'll hear about some of the traditions, and you'll hear about some of the DNA that is now coming into genealogy. We'll talk about a lot of that today. So, with our first speaker, who'll be up in a few minutes here, we're going to hear something about the snapshots from the Scottish Migration album, the expectations and experiences in the United States. And so that's going to be coming out here in our